just recommend it. What happened?
That's the loop. The loop on
the loop's in music too.
So by default, if I remember correctly, background music is looped when you enter the studio, and video clips are not. So you actually have to go, and we want to do it the opposite.
We want the opposite.
So we have to go in and flip both, and it's easy to forget. I think there's ways around this, but you know.
Yeah. Welcome to Friday, folks.
Yeah.
So it's Rich, it's Chris, it's TheDevTalkShow, Friday, almost 8 a.m. here on the East Coast. What do we call this now? This is standard time.
Yeah.
Daylight savings time. So EST. As we
the
say.
sun is actually up time.
Yes. Yeah, it's actually bright out there. Kind of nice.
Yeah.
So welcome. We've got some fun stuff we're going to do today. I think it's fun. It's actually kind of a repeat of a session I did a little bit with a customer yesterday, at least the structure of it. So I have a good, comfortable feeling that this should kind of work. So this will be fun.
Cool.
Yeah. How are you doing today, Chris?
All right. I think looking forward to the weekend. There's a nonprofit I work with, which is called We Connect the Dots. And in December, they have a hackathon, which you can still sign up for. It's for ages 13 to 18, middle school and high school students. And basically, it is designed to simulate a professional hackathon, meaning you get put in groups and teams, and you build. The team builds a website addressing a global need on the UN Sustainable Goals list. I call it a list, but I feel like it's got a more authoritative sounding name than that. And so for many of these students, they're building their very first website ever.
Nice.
And we start with the basic building blocks, HTML and CSS, and a little JavaScript. And then if you come back for repeat years, we tend to layer on to the approach and teach some JavaScript libraries. The very top tiers will use React.
Nice.
And the other part of the program that we'd always strive for is that you can complete, and which is, if you are a long time viewer, like you've been with us a very long time, then you'll understand where some of my looking into development entirely in the browser comes from, because we strive for that with this program. It's actually, it's not impossible, but it is, it's difficult to find a wide range of tooling that you can use 100%. It actually used to be easier, but some of our friends at various online code places have started limiting the free tier, which makes sense because that was costing them money to run virtual machines. That was not free as much as it was. I was happy to take advantage of it. So, you know, there's some interesting issues to work with there. VSCode.dev is a great, fantastic resource for us. And it works fantastic in a lot of ways. The only piece that it doesn't have, which makes sense, it's in the browser, is that, you know, the live server extension that I love to use live, that doesn't work in VSCode.dev for reasons that make sense. So that makes but live share works great. So that is fantastic. Live share works great in VSCode.dev, which is the totally in-browser Visual Studio Code. And then GitHub is a fantastic resource because not that there aren't many great other platforms for this, but it's this one-stop shop where push your code, teach the students and teams to push their code to a GitHub repository, and then just go turn on GitHub Pages. Right. And because all of our, no matter what tier you're working at, the highest tier, you're brand new, everything's static website. So just works.
That is awesome. That is a great project you've been working with over, what's got to be at least 6 years?
We were trying to figure out how many we've done. And it's funny that we were going back through archives, and we think the first one might have been 2014. It might have even been a year before that, because you came to the second one, I think.
I think so. And that was right when I think it was right when I joined Microsoft. So that would have been 2016.
Oh, okay. So you might have come in 2016. Our first one might have been 2014 or 2015. And I had to go back through emails because Microsoft employee Dave Voiles is who got
Yeah.
me into there, and that was just really cool to be a part of. And then we were on site for a very long time. COVID shifted it to an online platform, but we are trying to look for new sites for next year to try to get back to the in-person. Just the in-person group of maybe anywhere from 20 to 50 students a site. It depends on the site. And then they would stay the whole weekend, like some hackathons where you literally just slept there. I don't know that hackathons are doing that as much anymore. And I'm not saying I know, I literally don't know. But at the time, it was very common to hear about a weekend hackathon where, like, oh, I'm going to go grab a couple hours of sleep and stuff like that. So we'd always been trying to simulate that experience.
Mm-hmm.
Except that actually asking the students to go to sleep overnight. So,
Yeah. But you guys had all kinds of cool things for them to do. The location where you were, there was a gym there. There was, different activities. So it kept them entertained. And when they got back to the code, it was something different and fresh again. So
yeah, we would take breaks too. Like we would have these mandatory sessions that had nothing to do with the project they were working on. Like you said, there was there was in the gym, we would just kind of have some fun things to do in the gym that had nothing to do with code at all. But then depending on who we could get donations from or help from, we had some years where they built, we had like drones, and they would code the drone to try and find landmarks on the ground in the gym. And then we did another thing one year where there were these little robots, and they had cameras on them and a library that helped them find their way. And so they tried to find their way through a maze. And it really was just more problem solving and more trying to open everybody's worldview to, you can do a lot with this stuff. It doesn't have to, there's many places you might find exciting. Did a machine learning thing one year where they took a lot of pictures and then trained the machine, and then the machine could then do things really interesting, like and that one team actually incorporated this into the project later. Was if you picked up a material, it would tell you whether or not that was something that could go in your recycle bin.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So like you'd show it a cell phone and it would be like, no, and you'd show it a piece of paper and it would say, yeah, and you'd show it a newspaper, and they just trained it by showing it lots of things. And it did pretty good considering they trained it in a weekend manually. Right. And then the team actually, after we did that exercise, they shifted course and changed their sustainable site project to be about worldwide recycling. And they used that, like you could actually go to the website and turn on your camera and scan something. It would be like, yes, put this in your recycling or something like that.
Oh, that's fun. Very cool. Scooter's happy.
Yeah, he came in with, I guess maybe he had like a big alert or something. No, we're good. It's fine.
Okay.
Executive producer. All right. So got less than an hour till 9.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I have to jump for my stand up at 9. We're actually in the office today. We got our whole team in here. So we're going to spend our day talking about what it is we're doing and how we can be better at it. So it'll be fun. Cool. But what we're going to do first is we've been starting to work on and plan this application for the user group app. And what we did some initial things around, getting it deployed and getting it up and getting the project created. So we've got those pieces in place. And I think now we're kind of at the state where we kind of need some data, right? It's a greenfield application. We don't really have, a previous version of this that we can go to and say, hey, let's just go pull that data sample out of prod and let's pull that down here and use it as a test base for building out some new functionality or the new app. So in this case, though, we're gonna essentially build it on, which sounds like a boring show, us just making up data. And what got me thinking about it was when we did the CosmoDB database a few shows ago, and you're coming up with the session title and the date and all that. It's like, yeah, that seems like a lot. There's got to be a better way. And what wound up happening was I was working with this application.
Do we need to share screen or you getting that? Yeah. Okay, cool.
So I was working with this application, and this application is something that I'd been watching the team develop and show at a number of different conferences. I think it was a build. There was an NDC video where it was there. And this is something that Steve Sanderson created, part of the .NET team. And the eShop is the kind of the classic, sample app that they use for showing .NET Aspire and some of the .NET Blazor features. And this is an offshoot of that, where it is completely focused on the customer support side of it. So there's an app that you can log tickets as a user. There's another app that you can be there as the customer support rep and see all those tickets. And what was great about this app, and why I always talk about it, is that it showcases, although there is chat there, it showcases how AI can be used to essentially make your application much more intelligent. So the user creates a customer service ticket. That ticket gets reviewed. It gets summarized. So what's the content that the person wrote? So there's a summary that's generated. It gets mapped into a category behind the scenes. The sentiment, is the customer angry or happy about what they're writing? All of that gets captured and is essentially presented to the customer service rep when they look at the ticket. So now they know going into the ticket a little bit about what it is. So it kind of sets them down the path of understanding what's going on. And then once we're on the ticket side, there's still a little bit of chat here and some of the classic things we do with chat of looking at and pulling information back. So for me, this is one of the apps that I've been using a lot to talk to customers about saying it doesn't always have to be chat. Look at all the cool things you can do asynchronously as your application starts sending data around. Great.
Yeah.
I'm not building this app, but the one thing that he did. Go ahead. Do you have a question before I jump in?
No, we focus a lot on chat, especially with generative AI, because
Absolutely.
it's the use case that we're all familiar with. And I think, you and I, both on this show and elsewhere, have tried to say, we can go a lot further.
Yeah. And I think that's some of the cool things that he did inside of here. One of the cool things is the side project. So not even anything we've talked about so far, but he has a side project that actually generates all of the data. So this is an application that has, obviously they've got products, they've got manuals for those products, they've got evaluations, they've got tickets that get created, customers, categories. All of that gets created by this data generator application that the team built out. So that got me thinking, why don't we do the same thing here? We don't have anything as complex as this, but we certainly need to create some sessions, and we need to create maybe some people names and maybe, a couple of other things along the way. So maybe we can kind of take this paradigm that Steve Sanders and the team did here and build something similar for our data purposes. So that's kind of what I was thinking. That sound.
Yeah, especially because, like you said, we filled out like one meeting by hand,
Right.
sitting there dreaming up stuff. So
exactly, and creating data. It's like naming properties, right, or naming functions. Naming is hard. Coming up with data is hard. So what I did here was, created my own generative AI based data seeding project, and it's just a C# .NET console application, right? So I've already done that. I've created a console app. I've started to create some of the models. So I've got a person model here with a first name, last name, and an email address. Don't really need much more than that, I don't think, at this point. I've also created a session model with a title, a description, a start date, end date, and inclusion of speakers of a type person, and then a list of type person who are attendees. So that's the rough structure that I've got here. So what I want to do is, let's go ahead down the path of person's probably the easiest one, and we're going to need that when we get to the session side as well. So maybe we can use that to generate the session name or the people names first. Does that sound cool? Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So what we're going to do is, and I think we've shown this before in that there is let me bring it up here. Restart the extension. Sure. Let's see. We did a show quite a while ago on Prompty, which it's an extension for Visual Studio Code, but what it's meant to provide is this specification-based way of creating defining the engineering prompt. And that means that we've got typically, a couple of sections in that prompt. One is the system information. So when you're talking to generative AI, you kind of need that grounding of what it is this AI assistant can do. So that's typically in our system prompt. And then there's a user section, which is, well, what is the user asking as we interact with the generative AI? And then there might be, you know, additional information like what the assistant responds to when you actually see the full prompt. But for this here, we just really need to focus on the two, the system and the user. And what we get is we get the ability to actually include variables. So we could do things from code and pass those into the prompt as we go ahead and run it. So if we wanted to have a random amount of times that we want it to, or a random number of values we wanted to create, we could go ahead and say, you know, when we run this, let's do 1 or 2 to see if it works, but we're going to run it full scale. Give me 100, right? We could just inject that in at runtime using variables in the application itself.
Okay. That's cool.
And Prompty's pretty cool because it also has some capabilities to make it easy to talk to other or bring in other frameworks. And we'll show that in a second. So first thing we'll do here is we'll say, hey, let's go ahead and create a new Prompty file. And it gives us this basic sample. And then this one's going to be our people prompt. And this is a prompt that Jamie. For our system. So we're going to give it just a rough description up there for what it does. I'm going to get rid of all this extra stuff because we don't need it.
I like how Seth authors all of these. He's very busy. He works really hard. But, you know, I think that's funny just because Seth, I had the good fortune of meeting him several years ago. And to see, I remember when he showed this on stage I want to say it was maybe last year at a build or something like that. I don't.
It was this past build. Sure. Yeah, they were on stage in the session.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and that video is out there on the build site still if you want to go check and see the work that they did and some of the information about it. They're still working on it as a project. So if you go out to the Prompty site, there's still some to-dos up there. But it is, I've been using it a good bit when I've been doing the generative AI work with customers, and it's quite helpful in getting things up and prototyped quickly, which is awesome. One warning I will note, so this maximum tokens bit, and I ran into this yesterday, it kind of took me for a little loop. That is the max tokens that the generative AI is going to respond with. So in this case, we want, you know, there's a possibility that when we start asking for lots of information, we might need more tokens for it to generate in its response. And again, token is just, you know, a portion of a word, usually like 3-4-ish characters, right? So it ends up being like 3/4 of a word for most instances in the English language. So I think when I did it yesterday, I tried to make it 128. When you look at the specifications for the GPT for Omni model, you can take in 128, but you can only return like 4,000 or something like that. So that's why I kind of broke it. It's like, wait a minute, you're supposed to, you don't, it's, yeah, I was looking at the limit wrong. So this is on the return, just to be aware. So down here, this is where we're going to go ahead and define what it is that we want our system to do. So you AI assistant. Copilot, what's the helps people find answers to the questions now that generates sample data system. Beautiful, love it. Specifically, hey, see, nice, love it. Creating uses for our system. So word wrap, Control-Shift-P to get the menu, and you can see one of my more recently used commands, so I don't have to have the page scroll all the way across. Is that text big enough?
Maybe bump it up 1 or 2. It's readable, and I'm not watching full screen, so that probably helps too. But now that you've done that, and I switched to full screen, it looks pretty good here. So awesome. Hopefully it's looking great for everybody, and please let us know what you're seeing too. But yeah, all right. So you are, I see. Okay. Create user for the system. Yeah.
Great user. Okay. I don't think we need to
What about
do much more than that to start. Go ahead.
What about like generating a short bio? Do you think that would be? Is that pushing the envelope here? But while I don't want to, here I am just trying to. I know you have like some plans on what to do, which is cool. But you know, it's the Dev Talk Show, so it's like, well, what if we did this too?
Yeah. So,
do you want to wait on that?
If we wanted to go, I mean, maybe what we might. That's interesting because we certainly could. It would just take longer to get all of that data back. But what we might do is say, do we need to think about putting a category on the person, or do we need to think about getting a category, right? Because if you're a speaker, we're going to want to make sure you have a bio, and if you're just an attendee, we don't really care about your bio.
Right. Okay. I gotcha. Right. These aren't just users for speakers. I get it. Yeah. But certainly, like typically on a site, you know, you'll have the speaker bio and maybe just some other identifying stuff. It might be interesting too. Like you said, is that speakers are in this context, speakers are users, but we usually have more information about them.
Yes, definitely.
So in any case,
nope, all good. Good thoughts. We'll have to mull on that a little bit while we let this run. So our response must be in a JSON object. The following.
Yeah, as you're filling this out, this is the part I find interesting, and it was the eye-opening piece that I'm always used to just getting chat responses, and then you stop and think like, oh, well, why not just ask it to build the output?
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty neat.
Yeah, that is pretty fun. Blah at mydomain.com, right? Well, not blah, we'll say name. All right.
And you're missing one apostrophe at the end.
Yeah.
Very end.
I'm wondering if the name
the name at mydomain.com just didn't. Yeah, I don't know if.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
No, I was thinking. I saw the one apostrophe. I'm thinking maybe we should really double them up.
Oh no, I don't know that. I mean, I guess considering that it's JSON, right? Or is that?
Yeah.
Actually, JSON doesn't care, does it? I forget now. It's that early on a Friday.
We could leave it and see if we care. Let's see what we get back. There we go. But yeah, at this part, absolutely. That and then that, so that we kind of hold that off. Okay. Cool. All right. I don't think there's anything we need to inject into here, except you must generate a first name, last name for each user. Generate. For people. Leave it at that. Yep, for our system. Boom. Okay. We don't need anything else. So the idea there is that now we have what ends up being a variable that we can include. Maybe what we'll do is this. From there, right? Because everything up here talks about how you do what the generative AI is supposed to do, right? How it puts all that together. Down here, we'll say this is what the user is requesting, right?
Okay.
I got. And this came up in a recent conversation as well. We think about the system prompt. All of this essentially is part of the prompt that goes to the generative AI. There are some nuances in whether do you put something in the system prompt or do you put it in the user section? And the way I think about it is, if it's going to be consistently asking the generative AI to do this, I put it in the system prompt. If it's something that one-off where, oh, for my use case, I kind of want to ask it this way, or I want to ask about this particular thing, then that usually resides down in the user prompt.
Yeah. So like the system is setting up context for the whole conversation because
Exactly.
it's the thing you don't want to repeat. Now, for example, one instruction would be generate number of people users for our system, but then you could, and not that we're going to do this today, but you could have a second one that says provide an example of one of these objects transformed to XML.
Sure.
And I don't know why you'd want to ask that question, but it's a different ask. Still in the same context of we're generating sample data with a first name, last name, and email. I guess it's kind of like that. You don't have to repeat the beginning of the conversation, you know?
Exactly. Yeah, that's all kind of set. Yeah, good way of thinking of it. But you mentioned chat, and we're not doing chat here. So much like we've done on some other applications where we're talking to generative AI, we're not having a conversation with this. I mean, it is in I guess in bot development, at least if you use the terminology that we've used at Microsoft, which is it is a one turn of a conversation. The user asks something, the generative AI responds with it. That's the end of the conversation. So it's really a completion. You know, I've asked the question, or I've said, here, do this, and I get the response back.
Yeah. So you called it a completion, and I think there are these, and I don't know them all. I'm not going to be able to give you a list, but we all are familiar with chat where it's a conversation, but a completion API is here. I'm giving you this guideline, go make something.
Yes. Exactly. And then what I get back is that's it. That's context done. We're finished.
Now,
putting this in here because this last little bit around only respond with the JSON object, because often, you know, sometimes you'll get, here you go, here's my response, right? You get that little, it's trying to, you know, have a, you know, some human characteristics to it. So I say, just give me the JSON object, then I don't have to worry about checking and making sure what the starting curly braces or anything like that.
Yeah. Like, so when we talk about completion, that's not the same thing as, is that using, here's where I admit I'm new to the terminology.
Okay.
Is that using this the same model that the chat that if you were to put chat in that where you put it in API, if you would use the same model for completion or chat, and the reason why that sounds a little fuzzy is, for example, we're not out to use Dolly or text to speech. We're still in text completion, which is generally a GPT based model.
It is. So they are.
It doesn't have to be GPT, but that's the one we all think of, you know?
Exactly. That was where I was stuck on. Yeah. So the large language model, even the small language model. So having some generative AI model be the processor of my prompt request. In the past, and I think we got past it recently. So service models. So we look at least what's on the Azure service models. There were. You can see what these are, just the listing of all the models, but then we can get down to availability, support, usage, audio, turbo. I know there's a section here where we talk about it.
Yeah, I'm going to post that link as well too. So this was in Learn, Azure OpenAI service models.
Yeah. So let's look at this one here. We've got we've got
actually
this, which is GPT-3.5 Turbo. It's a new release, and you can see the description and the things that it does, right? This one, all right, it's calling out, hey, GPT-3.5 Turbo. That's an older one, but this one here, 3.5 Turbo - instruct. And that's kind of an interesting one because that one specifically calls out it is a completions endpoint only.
Okay. Okay.
whereas all of the other ones are mainly a chat interface. So what that means is that I could, if I wanted to do completions, and when we did the Hello Dolly project, it was this instruct one that we were using for that, because that was, at the time we wrote it, that was all that was really available from a completions perspective. But now I think, and you'll see when we go through, I don't know if it says it here specifically, but for GPT 4.0, we're using that for completions as well as chat.
Okay, so that's the trick, is that the models have, this is where I'm trying to delineate the two, is, for example, you see right there, GPT, the top one, says structured outputs, text and image processing, JSON mode. So that's interesting, that JSON mode. I have to look into what that means exactly. And then further down, you have models that were image models, and so on.
Yeah. So our Dolly.
So a completion model, at least right now, doesn't make much sense to Dolly.
Yeah. No, well, it doesn't. Well, so let's
it
think about that a little bit. Dolly kind of is a completion model, because what we do is we give it the text we want it to create the image, and it returns us the image.
Yeah.
End of story. There's no context. There's no having a history and a conversation about it. It's just, here's the text, give me the result.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So the word, the context of the word completion is what you kind of have to wrap your brain around.
Yeah. It's I've seen completion used for things where much like we do in here, I'm setting some things up and I want it to just give me a response. So for example, there's that when we first started doing this, people were using it as a way of creating characters for a story, or creating an outline for a story. Well, that can be, at least how people are using it, a one, here's the grounding of which I want you to create the story in, or create the characters in, and then return those characters, a list of characters for me. You could iterate on that. It's like, that's great, but make the names more, medieval or something like that, right? So you certainly could iterate on it, but then you would probably want to store that in the prompt, so that if you ever need to regenerate those again, they would come out with similar kind of qualities.
Okay, cool.
Awesome.
All right. So back at our prompt.
Keeping on the clock, kind of bottom of the hour here. That's so true. What we're going to do is push through a little bit. We're going to keep it completion. We've got our assistant, and we're going to pass in this number of people object. Well, how are we going to pass it in? How are we going to call this? Let's go to the code. So what's great here is that if I right click on the basic prompty, what I get is, oh, sorry, wrong one. Boop. Oh, now I'm lost. Where's my mouse? There we go. We get this section down here that lets us bring in structured scaffolding of code, right? So not only from things like, and we haven't talked too much about this, but these are some of the common ways that you might orchestrate communication with generative AI. So prompt flow, it's something we have that's part of our Azure Machine Learning, but it basically lets you connect to various data sources, pull them all together, and put together a prompt that you can send to whatever model you want. We've seen command to kernel, and that's what we'll be using here. LangChain is something very similar to semantic kernel, as far as like an orchestration, abstraction way of communicating with any model wherever they might live. So they might be using Azure OpenAI. They might be using OpenAI, the service. They might be using another location for these models, which is called Hugging Face. They might be using, some of the other various locations where models live and you can deploy and interact with. And that LangChain, semantic kernel, they give you that abstraction to be able to talk to them kind of wherever they are. So for this here, we're going to go ahead and say, let's add some semantic kernel code. Now it's going to give me a class. And this class here is just basics. It is taking the name of the promptee and, putting an SK after it. But what we get here is some things that we've got to put in place. So we need a deployment. So where does the deployment come from? So we go to, at some point I will ask to come off screen because one of the things that is in there is the key, and I don't want to have that kind of hanging around. So if I go here, make sure, 1 second. Go, get that back. So this is my Azure OpenAI instance.
Can you zoom in just a little bit?
Oh, sure.
Okay, perfect.
Back up. So keys and endpoints, this is the piece that we need to be aware of. But this is where you would get those. So there is an API key, and that's both of those. You get two of them, but you can refresh them as needed.
Right.
And then there's also the location where this lives and the endpoint, which are fortunate or capably masked out by Azure Mask, which is an awesome plugin when you do live stuff. So, yes, all of that is there. So that's great. That's two of the three pieces I need. What about the other piece? Well, let's go back to our open study. We're going to use Azure AI Studio. Azure AI Studio being, more than just OpenAI. It's all of the AI services that we have. So this is our chat playground. We could go ahead and start doing a chat. We're not going to do that. I'm going to look at our deployments. And what we have here is essentially
that's real small. Yeah.
Yeah. Essentially what we have here is the GPT-4o model that I've got deployed. And there is an end. That is the only information you need. So when you do deploy a model, you name it whatever you want. So in this way, it becomes a little bit unique for the service that I have. So, but it's easy for me to remember. So that's what I have there. So now I'm going to go back to here, where we're going to go ahead and say, am I in the right folder? Yes, we are. So I want .NET user secrets init. I think we already have, let me double check. I think we already have the project. So we've got configuration, we've got user secrets. Okay, we've imported the packages, so that's good. So now I can do .NET user secrets. And at this point, I think we'll probably shift away from me.
Okay. Yeah, let me switch that for you here. Okay. Oops.
Cool.
I'll take care of all that. So yeah, what's happening here is if you've watched this show a lot, we tend to put secrets like that into the secrets.json, everything that's built into ASP.NET that allows you to manage user secrets in a file that's not in your source folder. That way, the purpose of that feature is so that you don't accidentally commit it to source control. Like I'd say that's the number one reason for that feature. And then the number two reason is at least what helps us a little bit is that way it's not sitting in your solution explorer. You don't actually accidentally click on it. Although believe me, I've still managed to leak secrets and then have to rush and delete Azure resources, which I tend to kind of do anyways, just after a show. Is just I don't want to have to think back like, did I do a good job today? Maybe I'll just blast everything and then which is also why if you watch a lot of the show, you see how I'm constantly looking for automating the build up so that way I can freely tear down and then build back up later if needed. So I did include in the show notes, if you're watching in the future or you're watching on YouTube, the show notes have the video from the build conference in May with Seth Juarez and I don't know Lee, but Lee Boron Simmons, and I hope that I'm saying that close to correctly, on practical end-to-end AI development using Prompty. And this was one of the first times that I saw Prompty. So I thought it was pretty cool. And that way everybody can watch that. And nice. At the same time, what else do we have? When you showed the Azure OpenAI models, I grabbed that page from Learn just because I figure, at least for me anyways, I feel like it's helpful for somebody who says like, oh man, where was that page that Rich was showing? Then then at least you have it.
Yes. Nope. That's great to grab. That's awesome. So I think we can come back to me now because I've gone through and saved all of those off.
Okay.
Cool.
Flip that back.
Nice. All right. So back to me. This is just my program CS location. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can remember how to do this. Oh, it's prompting me. Good. Yes, that's awesome. It's a JSON file, but that's not what we want. But first, we're going to take care of this, which is using extensions configuration. Beautiful. And add a JSON file, but that's not going to help us because our values are not there. What we want to add is user secrets program. There we go. So this is going to now pull those user secrets out for us. And that.
So what you're doing
about that. Go ahead.
Is you're taking this, and this is just for people who maybe aren't aware, you're taking the user secrets capability that ships with ASP.NET, but was so popular that there's even Learn documentation on what you're doing, right? On how to use user secrets. Let me see if I can go find that while you're working on how to use user secrets in any application, including a console app.
Yes.
I remember it starting as an ASP.NET Core feature. And then I think really what happened is people said, this is great. Why can't I use it in a console application or any application? So here it is right here. User secrets in non-web applications. And that's what you're doing right now. You created a configuration builder. So I've got a link straight to that. I'll make sure I include that in the show notes as well. That's a really cool thing. So
yeah. And so what I'm going to do then is just basically roll that out. So let's see, it wants to say deployment name, and it's kind of right. You didn't see this because it was off screen, but I'm basically hierarching my my variables basically. So Azure OpenAI : deployment name. So we'll keep that where it is. The yellow squiggles is because, hey, this could be a null value. I know it's not because I took care of it, but we'll go ahead and do that. Yep, it learned from the previous one, and actually, because it didn't see a little nuance there. So Copilot being an awesome helper, but you still got to oversight it and make sure that the values in there are accurate. And then endpoint, and then for me, I use endpoint URL. Awesome. So that's it. So now we're all set. All those values exist. What I'm going to do is, instead of having this code sit over there, you certainly can do that. What I'm going to do is actually just get rid of it and bring it over into Program CS just for speed and accuracy to get this done. So where did that go? There we go. Nope. Huh? Okay, copy. That's interesting. Do you guys know about timeline?
I don't know. I saw that you...
The timeline will keep a history as you save things. Let me see if, so this is, let's go basic property. Yeah, basic property. So as you save things, you actually have a running history that you could revert back to if something blows up, fails, whatever.
Is that a core feature of Visual Studio Code, or?
It is a core feature of Visual Studio Code, yeah. It took me a while to once I heard it, I was like, oh yeah, that has saved me a couple of times since hearing about it. So that's pretty cool.
Huh.
Yeah. So, hey, I think we need to make a short out of that.
Yeah, look at that. Because I'm looking at it now. I found a blog post, but now I'd be interested to find some documentation. So no, that's pretty neat.
Awesome. All right. So back to the building. So the program file, we're going to paste that. Why are you not letting me paste it? Oh, because the cursor wasn't there. Lovely. Nice. All right. So we've got our section here with all of our configuration stuff, just to kind of clean things up because we don't need to see this anymore. Beautiful. And then what's great about regions is you can close them and nobody has to see them anymore. But we know that's where they are. Right. Although, why? Oh, deployment. Got it. Okay. We can get rid of all of these because we created them ourselves a little differently. So I'm going to go here and say deployment name.
Yeah. So these variables that you're replacing it with are in the configuration region and coming out of the secrets.json.
Yes. API key. So all of those are there now. What's it's not happy about is this kernel here. And I've already gone through and added the package for semantic kernel because we kind of need that to be able to talk using that framework. So I did that ahead of time. So just did .NET new add package or .NET add package with Microsoft semantic kernel. So we're going to say using. So that gets covered. And this one, excuse me, this one is a little more involved. So really quick, what's here is when you use semantic kernel, oftentimes what you wind up doing is creating a function and then later on invoking the function. And that's what we're seeing here. So line 28 is we're going to create inside of our kernel engine a function. And that function is going to be based, in this case, it is a prompty function because we're creating that function from the prompty file. Prompty skills right now are, or prompty capabilities right now are still experimental. So the team is very good about looking at the features that are there and saying, these features are ready, they're generally available in production. These features are alpha, beta, whatever, however they're classifying it. I'm not recalling right now, but basically, if you're going to do it, we want to make sure you're aware of it. So you need to turn those warnings or actually those errors in this case off. So the error we need to turn off is SKEXP0040. And we can do that by going here and doing a pragma warning disable.
Yeah, this is just to say it's kind of like an acknowledgement that you get that you are using preview features.
Exactly. Or are you having a problem?
Is it a pound pragma? I forget.
That's a good question. I didn't think so. But I guess it is. Good call. Cool. And then just for completeness, I can come down here and pragma warning restore.
I think it's trying to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I'm doing it here where the method is called. You can do it, I guess, more at the entry level of the application.
Yeah.
There's more of a global way of doing it too.
You could do it for the whole project too. I think a lot of developers, and look, this is a choice developers will make. A lot of developers like doing it at the source so that way there's this real declaration of intent that I know these lines of code are using a preview feature. Or if it's not a preview feature, some other pragma, some other warning that you're disabling. I get that I want the warning, but I get that I'm turning it off here. So it's really a choice. It's a choice. I suppose if it's something that you're going to be dealing with over and over and over in your app for some reason, then you might want to just put it in the CS project and get it over with.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. So we're kind of at almost at the end of and getting ready to kick this off. So what we have, the one thing we have to finish though is we've got a kernel builder created. We're talking specifically here to Azure AI. What do we call it? Azure OpenAI, right? So this is looking at communicating specifically with that. So as we mentioned, you can talk to many different services out there. So you got to make sure you bring in the right service. And by doing that, we then make sure we get the deployment, the endpoint, and the API keys. All those are there. Down here at the bottom, we've got our prompty. We're creating our function, pointing to our basic.prompty file. And then we are going to go ahead and invoke that function and await the response. And when we do it, we pass in the kernel object and pass in the arguments. And that's what we got to do next. So if we come over here, let's save this. The argument we need to be aware of is this here, number of people, because if we don't provide it, it's when that function goes to run, it's going to say, I don't know what this value is, and it'll fail out on us. So over here, we're going to give number of people, right? Because that's what the first one is, what we called it in the prompty file. And then over here, we're just going to say, let's make it 5.
Okay.
And that should be it. It looks like that's it from a coding perspective. And this is interesting. When it happened to me, I thought of something. I think you ran into this with something else, and I'm in Visual Studio Code, and I had no idea how to fix it. But when we do this and build it, by default, the way things are now, the basic.prompty does not get included in the bin. So you get an error saying, I'm running here in the bin and I don't see this file. So what we can do is unlike in Visual Studio, where we can click on the file in the Explorer and right click and say, copy to something or other, right? Mm-hmm. We're doing that here. And that's for another one. So let's see, this is basic.
Okay,
so we're copying really the output.
Yeah.
Yes. The error hit me, and then I recalled what you did. That was the only way I figured it out so quickly. So this show is quite helpful, at least for me. So we've got all this. We're going to save that. Now, the thing I don't know is that the right language? Because we don't have that. Let's get rid of that because prompty's there at the root. What I was trying to do is say, hey, let's put a prompty folder and put all of our prompties in here. And I was doing some practice and helping move things along because we haven't even run one yet and we're almost an hour. But yeah, so let's go through it. So let's build. Oh, .NET build? Sure. Those are a bunch of null reference properties. That's fine. Looks like it's compiled. Wait a minute. Yeah, that's fine. Those are all just warnings. Not that warnings are not important, but in a demo like this, we're just going to go ahead and bypass all those. Let's do our run and debug.
Yeah, tell us in the comments if you turn on warnings as errors in your project. On home projects, I actually turn it on immediately.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And part of it is because it's very difficult to go the other way. I can't say that I see it used a lot in different organizations, and partially because I think that if you don't turn it on right away, that you get 6 months to a year into the project and you realize, well, we have 2,314 warnings now, and we're never going to clear them all. So,
right.
But I like it. I like it. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's mandatory or even perfect, and it can be frustrating. But I think it just makes you address everything. So I kind of like it. All right, so here we go.
Pausing here because we did the run and debug. We said debug is C#, which is great, but we need kind of a launch JSON to make this run. So we're going to do a launch executable file console, I think is the one we want to go with. So let's do that. That gives us a bunch of information that we're putting in here. I'm going to replace the net 8.0 and then give it my project DLL name, which is, what do they call this one? Gen AI datac.dll. Cool.
Okay.
Launch pre-launch task. That's fine. We don't have any arguments. This was something that was problematic. We don't have any arguments that included here, but if your console app included arguments, this is where you would add them so that when you run, you can, run it just like you would when you're running it from the command line. But it gives you the ability to run and debug. Or launch, that's fine. Hit it. Debug anyway, that's fine. Well, that's awesome.
There it is.
I was just thinking, I didn't put a console write line, so how are we going to know what the results are?
Yeah.
But we got, as you can see here, we got our collection back. We've got our 5 names with a first name value, a first name value, last name value, and an email, which is really interesting to generate all that. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think we need to do some more when it comes to stop running. Yeah, it has stopped running. It just ran once. Did the output to the console, and that was it. Okay, but
so
it actually gave us.
Console, did it come from a line of code, or did you think it came from the library?
It came from the library.
Okay.
Yeah, we didn't ask it to output anything. which we could do real quick. We could basically say, let's close that. Do we just
Well,
want
no,
to say, let's say,
do you think that console write line result is that it on line 30?
Oh, I'm sorry. It did give us a
Okay.
result.
All
Okay.
right.
There you go. That's what it did.
So like you could just easily make that like 50 and boom, you're off and running.
Yeah. And I think with just giving, and we could do that and we could say, hey, here's this. Save it. Let's go ahead and run it again. Remember my choice. We're good. That's only 5. Didn't I save it?
Maybe. Now that's interesting.
Yeah. Did I put the variable right or the value right? Number of people.
Is that O capitalized? I wonder. No.
No. No, we're good. Huh.
I was just curious about why. That's interesting that it didn't seem to change it. Did it not build it? Did it not rebuild the app? Because so basically it might have just run the old code.
That's a good point. All right.
Because yeah, I know you made the launch JSON really quick, and I make them quick the same way, so I can't just look at it and be like, okay, I know exactly, but for some reason it's not building. But
that might have been it's taking longer this time.
Yeah, so definitely, I think that's what that was, is that we didn't just rebuild the one simple. There you go. Yeah. So some interesting observations. I don't think there's any. This is where you learn about prompt engineering, is that it's definitely coming up with different names, pulling lots of different names. But when you gave it the email, use this form, it took that a little literally, and everything is mydomain.com, which could be okay. I wonder if maybe you'd want to say like use these sample domains, or I mean, for example, if I recall correctly, example.com is kind of left out there as a this doesn't really work domain, doesn't really resolve. Okay. I think that's true. There's something in my brain that tells me that. I don't know if there are more than one of those, but it does say, actually, yeah, so there's example.com, example.net, example.org, and example.edu are reserved as special use domain names for documentation purposes.
Oh, that's fun. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's something I learned a while ago. There's others too, like apparently .example is one of them. I don't know if there are more.
Okay. Interesting.
So
good to know.
So that maybe that's a last minute thing that everybody learned if you're writing documentation and you're. It's kind of like, how do we date ourselves by saying 555 555-1212 or something.
I'm going to do that here. I'm going to update and say name at example.com. This way it kind of flows. So
the sample phone number that I think for many years was used in movies, TV, stuff like that to make
people
sure
off
that
the scent.
Well, just to basically so that you could. It was meant to telephone companies began encouraging the use of the 555 prefix for fictional telephone numbers in the 60s. I don't know much more than that, but there were some others. There were some others that even before the 7-digit codes, apparently, I'm reading now some really interesting stuff. Klondike 5 was broad usage among script writers. Like, wow, you're going way back there. But the whole idea was to the phone number used by Jim Rockford in the TV series The Rockford Files was 555-2368. Because what was happening is people were picking up the phone and calling that number.
Sure. So anytime you see a number out there in the wild, in video.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are just a few minutes. Now, the next step is we have a JSON object. So this could be saved to a JSON file. And what we could do from here is we have our Cosmos DB. that we could load up with this information, and now we would have example users so that we don't have to sit there and type them all in, and then start doing the more interesting Cosmos pieces of looking up. For example, you have there Sarah Martinez. We could look that user up, and so on. So
right. Exactly. Yeah. Start to incorporate this in the app. Now that we've got a list of names, hey, let's put that list of names, use that list of names to start creating sessions, to find speaker, to find a bunch of attendees, and really start to integrate the pieces.
Yeah. And then you would basically just create another promptee that represents the sessions.
Yeah. Which we already started.
Yeah. And you're kind of off and running.
Yeah. Yeah, because we have our sessions object there. So started to build this out, but word wrap. There we go. Yeah, no, this will be fun. This is something I think we're going to try and do a show hopefully Wednesday again, and then be able to come back to this with some data already loaded. But you'll know how we got there. And then this project, we'll probably put it in the same repo as in a separate folder or something like that, so it can be stored alongside the other work we're doing.
Yeah, I think that'd be great to have this all in one place, and then, try to continue towards scripting so that people can just bring it down, try it out. All right. Well,
he's saying it's time to go.
Yeah, it's time to go. He's saying wrap, right? If only he could take his pause and do the wrap sign. But it is 8:58, and I know stand up is at 9. So want to thank everybody who joined us today live here on the Dev Talk Show. And if you were watching, even if you're watching live and you missed some of it, then head over to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/TheDevTalkShow, and you'll see we have a playlist there with the morning hour. And I usually try to take, and I'll do this afterwards, is move the show to the very top so they're in reverse chronological order. And you can, down in the comments, I think we've got some interesting pointers to documentation we looked at today. Just let us know that all of those things are working for you. And if you have any other topics you'd like us to look at, or if you've used this stuff and have some ideas for us, let us know down in the comments below. But I think that's it. I'll let you go.
That's awesome.
And we'll try and get out of here pretty quickly so that we can get to stand up, and we will see everybody. Let's see. We want to remove that stage, and we will see you all next time on the Dev Talk Show.